It's my privilege to introduce Wonda Bornstein, who has held a variety of teaching and leadership roles. She's taught beginning conversational sign language, held workshops on crossing cultural divides, and has coached and mentored leaders of an education and arts program for children in Ghana. Her most important role has been as President and Chief Executive Officer of the House DC, whose vision is to transform and empower the lives of inner city youth and their families through Christ by giving them hope, a productive future, and a changed community. The house is located in the Anacostia area of Washington, D.C. on a street formerly known as Murders Row in a building that was once a crack house. Now is a catalyst for youth to cultivate healthy relationships in Christ. The impact is startling. Since 2007, students involved in the House DC have a graduation rate from Anacostia High School of 97%, compared to just above 50% for students in the general population there. The Washington Post describes the House DC as an urban oasis where teens get encouragement, praise, and the kind of stable relationships with adults that are often missing in their lives. We've had a long relationship now with Wonda and the house. Baylor students have served as interns there. We had a session in Baylor in Washington on Byron Johnson's social impact study of the house, and we co-sponsored with the House DC an event on the life and legacy of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., marking the occasion of the 50th anniversary of his assassination that featured Cornel West. We're delighted to have her here at Baylor, where she spoke yesterday to a group of undergraduates in the Honors Residential College. This morning she will speak on the topic, Accountability Beyond Fear. Please join me in welcoming Wonda Bornstein.
It is so good to be here in Waco, and I said this last night when I was talking with some students, and I said, listen, I'm from the DC area, and it was just so glad to get out of DC, and I grew up 10 minutes outside of DC in Prince George's County, Maryland, and I said I could not wait to get here to Waco. And the guy came up afterwards, and he said, hey, I'm from St. Mary's County, and his name was Kyle. He said, I'm from St. Mary's County. He said, have you ever heard of it? I said, oh, are you kidding? My dad was from there. And I said, no, you know, when I stood up there and I said that, I was telling the truth. He goes, oh, I completely understand. It is so toxic now. And so I'm going to try to not bring any of that toxic stuff here. I'm going to keep it Texas friendly. But I do appreciate being able to come here and talk with you. And I want to share a little bit about how the house got started. You saw the video. So it was in 1996, around that time, when Promise Keepers was coming to Washington, D.C. And for those of you who were not born, look it up. But Promise Keepers were coming to town, and there's a group of men, they wanted to reclaim the family. They had different themes, and one of the themes was racial reconciliation. So there was a white church a predominantly white church in Northern Virginia, and there was this one man who said, you know what, we should find an African-American church that we can partner with and go to Promise Keepers together. And so they found an African-American church, and then they started to do different types of things. They were going to have picnics, and they were reading books together, just trying to build those bridges. And the idea came, hey, what can we do together? And so together what they created was the House DC. So we're celebrating 22 years this November. So I just wanted to let you know how the House DC got started. And so one of the people that you saw in the video, the young woman, I just want to share with you where she is today. So when she gave that interview, she was in college. Someone that came to the House DC, constantly having conflict, and we had to work with her through those conflicts and hold her accountable, which is what our topic is about today. And so through that, she graduated from high school. She ended up going to college, and this past May, she graduated from college. And so she got a job working at a law firm in New York, and we knew that she could not work from home because everything was online at the time. So she's actually working in our office space, and she uses our reception area, and that's her office. And she just found out that she's going to be able to go to New York and actually work there, and so she'll be moving in a couple of weeks to New York. So just wanted to share just where she is today. The young man that you saw at the end, we're still working with him. He's a hard worker. He wants to work, but he has a lot of challenges, and we are still working with this young man. So I wanted to give you just a little bit. So the topic today, accountability beyond fear. how did we create an accountability culture at the House DC? We're all about relationship building. That was just so important for us. And so for us, relationship building looks like this. We eat lunch together a lot. We find an excuse to go out to lunch on a regular basis. We do things like we have retreats where we will take and have prayer retreats, and we go away where we pray together. Our weekly staff meetings are started with prayer and devotion. Everything that we're trying to do is we're trying to build that relationship. And so we talk about our family. We're very honest with one another. And we create a safe place as well. And that safe place looks like people being able to be vulnerable and to feel comfortable and not be called out and not afraid to speak about truth. And so we kind of create, but it's also very important that there's vulnerability in leadership. Now, I can't possibly expect someone to feel safe, to be comfortable, if I walk around as a leader that I'm perfect. You ever notice that depending on who the president is, where you are, if you're in your church, I just remember in some of the churches I went to, here's God, and then here's the president, depending on if you voted for him or not, and then there's the pastor, and there's everybody else. Well, that's ridiculous. This is God, and this is everybody else, including the president and pastor. But it's so important for leaders to be honest when they make a mistake. And so that was one of the things that we would do. In our meetings, I'd say, gosh, guys, you won't believe what I did. I got upset about this and this and that. I said a French word, I'll use that I should not have said. And I just, I had to ask God to forgive me, or something happened over the weekend and I did this and that, or whatever happened, I blew up about this. And then I had staff would say, oh gosh, you won't believe what happened with me over the weekend. I did this or this or that. And so we started to, and they were watching, they were watching me be very honest. And then there were times they say, hey, what happened to that thing? I gave it to you. No, you didn't. Yeah, I did. And then I'd find, you were right, I was wrong. Oh, and that idea that I had, you were right, I was wrong. You had a better idea. And that's so important for leaders and people that are in leadership to be vulnerable, to be honest, and to accept responsibility so that other people can feel safe to do the same thing. So we also created an accountable culture, had a shared faith in God, and understood our accountability to Him, regular prayer and devotions, as I talked about earlier. We wanted to live for God. That was the point of having regular prayer and devotions, and to grow spiritually. Our conversation centered around doing what's right in God's sight. We would not compromise what we believed God wanted us to do. We had different approaches, but the same desire to please God. We had mutual respect and a desire to live together in unity before God. So you see, I've underlined what is the theme there. Everything centered around God. And that's what it looked like for us. Everything was centered around wanting to live, wanting to do what was right in His sight. And that's where accountability starts first. That's the foundation. So how do we get there? How did I get to that point? A basic understanding of God. So at first I had an understanding of God, and then I'm thinking, wait a minute, Wanda. He says in Isaiah, my thoughts are higher than your thoughts. My ways are higher than your ways. How can you understand me? So I had to change that in a basic understanding of God. So I'm going to share a story with you of how I became and I understood the accountability that I had with God. I was in my 20s, and I'm not anymore. And as I shared last night, I am not old enough to be your grandmother, but your mom. Okay, so I'll say that. But I was in my 20s one day, and I'm riding down the road, and I started thinking about how much Jesus was compassionate and how kind He was and how giving He was. And I was just smiling, thinking about how Jesus. And then this thought started coming to my mind. I'm thinking, oh, I don't want to think it. I'm not thinking that. I'm not thinking that. Nope, don't want to think it. I don't want to think it. I don't want to verbalize it. And then as I was going through those thoughts, I was like, oh, LaWanda, you just might as well verbalize it. God knows your thoughts. You can't hide them. So then I was just like, okay, God, I love Jesus. I think He's compassionate. I think He's kind. But when it comes to God the Father, I have a different feeling for you. You say, love me with all your heart, soul, and mind. That's a commandment, and I don't. I think you're harsh. I think that you want to punish me when I'm doing something. It says that God is love. I don't really see that. I know it's wrong. I know that's wrong for me to feel that way. But I'm just telling you how I feel because you already know how I feel anyway. So change the way I feel. Let me see who you really are. And I said, because I don't want to feel that way. I know it obviously can't be true, but that's how I feel. And so as I started to read scripture more, and I remember that conversation I had as I started to read scripture more, and this happened like over a course of maybe 6 months or so. I was really getting to scripture. And then I was like, wow, not only is his creation beautiful and his mind is amazing, and I can't even fathom it, but he's loving, he's long-suffering, he's forgiving, he's kind. And I thought, man, if I were God and I had to deal with people around, man, I tell you, I would be wiping people out just like that. And the first time you damned my name, I was like, did they just damn LaWanda? Oh, there we go. And I just thought, man, God is just amazing. He's nothing like that. And so my understanding, my basic understanding of who he was allowed me to be accountable, allowed me to understand what that really meant. So why are people not accountable? What is the big problem here? Is that they're afraid. Fear, accepting and acting on truth, losing control, being vulnerable. Can you imagine what would happen if the reverse were to happen, and that you were not afraid, and that you would act and accept truth, and that you would not be afraid of losing control or losing your position or being vulnerable? You know, there's a family that I know, and this mother had 3 kids, and she ended up giving her kids away to foster care and orphanage. They were raised. And one of her sons, we were having a conversation once, and he said, you know, and this mother, their father was killed, but this mother could have taken care of the child and could have taken care of her children, but she chose not to. She didn't want to be bothered. And so every time they would have a conversation, then he stopped talking to mom, it would always be how much she did for them. He says, I don't understand why she's always saying, I did all these things. I mean, look how we were raised. And I thought, wow, isn't that something? If she just accepted responsibility, if she accepted the truth and said, you know what, I wasn't a good mom. I'm really sorry. I did what I did because of whatever the reasons may be. I am so sorry. Can you forgive me? Can you imagine how freeing that would be for her as well as her son? So people just don't want to face the truth, and that's one of the reasons why it's hard to be accountable. And then those questions that you have to ask. Did you do it? Why did you do it? What are the results of your actions? Will you fix it? What are your consequences? This is kind of like when you were a kid, you remember? And you did something, and your mom is like, who did it? Who's responsible? You're going to get in trouble. And you're like, oh gosh. So they kind of put a fear in us at a young age of not wanting to be accountable because you don't know what's going to happen. Truth plus accountability equals consequences. Correcting a wrong, repaying what was taken, giving up freedoms, that can happen when you're accountable. Stripped of a position, that can happen. Loss of materials, no peace of mind. Truth plus accountability. There was a young man at House DC, and my assistant had been working with us for about 5 or so months. And she parked her van on, and so I'm in Southeast Anacostia, very, very rough area. It's actually the most challenging area in the entire DC area. And so she parked her car, not in our normal kind of like alleyway space that we have, and she parked it on the street. Well, she goes out one night because we work basically from like 11 to 8 at night. And she goes out on the street and her van is not there. And so she's like, oh my goodness, she's calling her insurance company, she's calling the police, et cetera, trying to file a report and do all the things that you need to do. And so I thought, well, let me just go to some staff who have relationships with some of our young people in the community. And I said, hey, listen, Kim's car got stolen. Is there something we can do? Find out where? Is there anything we can do? So he said, let me see. A couple of them said, let me see what we can do. So he picked up the phone, he called this one young man, and the young man said, okay, listen, I'm not going to say who stole anything, but I can tell you that we know it was house people. We have a lot of respect for the community. So listen, how out. In 45 minutes, I'll call you back. I'll let you know where the van is so you can get it. And by the way, I have a court date coming up. Can you go with me to court? And I need a suit. And the staff person said, sure. He said, absolutely, I appreciate that. And so he said, LaWanda, it tells him what's going to happen, and the van showed up. Someplace, 45 minutes later. And that is the relationship that we had in this community. But he was being held accountable. He held himself accountable for what he had done. Even though he didn't specifically say, listen, I'm not going to say anything, but in 45 minutes, that van's coming back, okay? And the van came back. And so now the people on the phone thinking that my assistant is like making up stuff, she's lying, etc., because they've never heard of such a thing. Who steals a vehicle and then brings it back? And so this was someone who said, I'm going to hold myself accountable. So what did he do? He corrected a wrong. He didn't actually repay what was taken, but he corrected that wrong, so he gave it back. He didn't give up any freedom, so he was able to come back to the LTC, so not everything. And sometimes when we do things, in our life, people don't see what we do behind closed doors. And sometimes just having no peace of mind just can take so much from you. And so sometimes the consequence is simply that I have no peace of mind. Yeah, I've been able to do things behind closed door, but God, that spirit in you will not give you peace of mind when you are doing something wrong. And I love that whole story of the accountability. And the young woman that I had talked about earlier, same thing. Just always having issues and then having to say, let's sit down, let's talk about this, let's go through this, and let's talk about how to be accountable and how to be accountable to one another. So there's also freedom when you're accountable. There really is. There's freedom when you correct a wrong and asking for forgiveness. There's freedom when you repay what was taken. There's so much freedom in having just peace of mind and restoration with God and one another. And there's support in that as well. There's so much freedom in being accountable. People are afraid to be accountable, but it allows you to be able to be restored, to do what's right. And there's so much to say about that. So what is there to fear? Now, fear is real. The emotion of fear, it is real. But what is there to fear? I shared with you a story earlier about me and how I thought. Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. So should we fear being vulnerable to God? No, not at all. Because his plan is not to harm us. He puts limits there to help us. But having fear and fearing who God is and kind of what I was thinking was just so wrong because of his love that we have. He says, don't fear me because I have great plans for you. Proverbs 21:1. The king's heart is like a stream of water directed by the Lord. He guides it wherever he pleases. So that means that do we have control? So when you think that you have control, people in politics and people in your leadership and the presidents and your pastors and teachers and people like that, people walk around and they think that they have control. And you've heard of the Napoleon complex. You've got other people that really believe they have control. But God says that I direct the heart and the minds of kings. I direct those hearts and minds. I can control things any which way I choose. So therefore, the control that people think they have is just delusional. It's in their own mind because God can stop and he can change things. When you look at the life of Job, and I think about that, and it's one of those books that my dad used to love to read. And I did not like to read Job. Because, come on. Some of you guys, the reason why you didn't like to read Job, because you're thinking, oh my God, I can't have boils. That's going to happen to me. He's going to strip away everything. Satan's going to be, talking to God about me. I don't even want to read the book of Job. But, when you're reading the Bible through, you can't skip over Job. But it's interesting because all those disasters and all those things that happen, his friends came around and they were like, what did you do? What kind of person are you? Why did you live the way you did? Why did these things happen? It's because of your sin. And it was not that. It was God allowing Satan to do all of that to show that Job still followed and trusted in him. Now, he says his ways are not our ways, his thoughts are not our thoughts. So life is not perfect. I don't understand why we have to go through what we do, but we know that he is in control, and there's a reason why. What is there to fear? Psalms 44:21. God would surely have known it, for he knows the secrets of every heart. Can we hide from the truth? Can't even hide from the truth. I mean, we can hide from truth sometimes from others for a period of time, but at some point in time, it will be revealed, either in this life or the next. But we can't hide anything from him. He knows our heart. Earlier, I said, I didn't want to think it. And whenever you start thinking to yourself, like, okay, I don't want to think it, I don't want to think it, I don't want God to know my thoughts. That's like crazy, because he knows our thoughts. And so we don't have to hide from the truth, because he already knows it. I remember growing up, and I grew up in a Christian family, went to Christian schools all of my life. From the time I was in kindergarten until I graduated in 1968, okay, I just told you my age. But at any rate, and so I just remember always, and we went to church every Sunday, and then we had, Bible studies at home, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I just remember having those prayers in church, and they were always, thank you for this day, forgive me, we just thank you and praise you, help me to do this, help me to do that. And those are good, but sometimes they're not honest. And so being honest with God and having those real prayers. I remember one time I was praying, and I just show you the power of God. And I was very angry. And I was angry because my husband was sick, and he passed away from cancer a number of years ago. And he was sick with cancer, and I really wanted to take him to MD Anderson, which is in Houston, one of the hospitals that wrote about his very rare form of cancer. And I just didn't have the funds. And I was so angry, and I was talking to God, and I said, listen, I was on my way to a dentist appointment. I said, listen, I am driving, and I've got some stuff to say, and a lot of stuff I'm going to say is just not going to be right. I can feel it, okay? So I just want to let you know up front, I'm about to say a whole lot of stuff. And so I started saying how I was really feeling, and I will keep the French words out of it. I don't know French, but hopefully you can read between the lines. So, and I'm thinking, man, I'm in ministry, I work really hard, I'm very giving, and I've got to be in this situation, I can't help my husband, we can't afford to go there, it's going to be so expensive, you got to stay for a whole week, and I'm just going on and on. And then I stopped, and I said, now, God, forgive me for the things that I spoke in French. I said, but I want you to know something. I'm not angry with you, because I know that your thoughts are higher and your ways are higher, but I'm disappointed. I said, I'm disappointed in you because you can fix all of this. And I said, I just want you to know, I'm disappointed, but I still love you with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my might, with all my strength. But I'm mad at you. And so I went on my appointment. I was on my way back, and I get a call 10 minutes later. And this person said, hey, LaWanda, my wife and I were talking. I know that you were going to MD Anderson. All he knew was I was going to go there. He didn't know anything. He goes, we would love it if we could just pay for you and your husband to go to MD Anderson, if we could pay for the hotel, the airfare, everything that you need. And he goes, as a matter of fact, let me get the airline on the phone right away. And I was like, no, well, wait a minute, I got to schedule it first. And we ended up, unfortunately, not being able to go. But when you are honest with God and you really tell him how you feel, that just opens up that door that allows you to have that relationship so that you understand accountability with him. It's nothing to be afraid of.
Can I give you this?
Yeah.
Your mic keeps cutting in.
Yeah, okay.
I'm so sorry about
Do you want
that.
me to take this off?
I'll just turn it off in the back.
Okay, all right.
So oh, wow. Woohoo. And see, I'm also vocal, so part of me was trying to talk loud because I'm like, I got a big mouth anyway. But this is really like power. I actually hate handhelds because I'm so animated. Now I gotta be in control. But anyway, So holding others accountable. I just think this is so important to do. I really do. Why don't people hold others accountable? Because they're afraid of losing their position or their status, afraid of losing their livelihood possibly, fear of losing friendship, rejection, not being in the in crowd. You know, when I think about holding people accountable and how there will be leaders and who will just do so many things that are detrimental to their organization, to their church, to their institution, to the country, or whatever it may be. And people are around them that are not holding them accountable, that are allowing them to do whatever they want to do. It is such a detriment to everyone that they are responsible for. We had a situation at the House DC where we took a group of young people on a retreat, and we do that on a regular basis. We take them on a retreat, and we try to get them outside of their neighborhood. And so this one time, we took a group of students out. We got a call when we came back in town, and someone had left their money clip in their car. And the money clip was very valuable to them. It was a gift, I think, or something that had been passed down and had $300 in it. And they said, hey, listen, we want to know if you guys could check to see if maybe somebody took the money clip. And we're like, oh, great. And I tell you, we tell the kids so many things, but, you know, so we let our young people know, hey, this is the story, this is what happened. We want to know who knows anything about the money clip. Well, one of our students said, I know what happened to the money clip. It was taken. Let us know what happened. He said, hey, I didn't take it, but I'm letting you know what happened. And we were able to get the money clip back from that person who took it. The $300 was gone, so the house had to replace that, and we drove it back down and 2 hours away to give it back. But I appreciated that young man for wanting to be accountable, for wanting to hold somebody accountable, because it was not right, and he understood that. People are afraid of losing something when we should be afraid of losing our relationship with God, being in right standing with Him. So I couldn't think of, I call this accountability holder, and that's what that guy was. But accountability holders requires ethics. It requires someone who is courageous. This person could possibly save a life. They care for the good of others. It can strengthen a heart, emotions, or someone's mental health. And they understand who they are ultimately accountable to, and that's God. I just couldn't think of, I was thinking accountability holder, whistleblower. I just couldn't think of a name that I really wanted, but I said, oh, I just call him an accountability holder. But this person understands who they are ultimately accountable to. And so therefore that fear of what others think of them, it's insignificant. It doesn't matter to them. Now, I don't mean you're holding everybody accountable because somebody, you know, was late, or somebody was, you know, they may have, you know, not crossed all their T's or dotted their I's. But I'm talking about some really serious stuff that can really harm individuals. Why be accountable? Because we care about our relationship with God. We have reverence for the Creator, and we trust in the Creator. That's the reason for being accountable. And so some people may not be a person of strong faith, and so I absolutely believe that there are those who don't have a strong faith or may not have a faith at all, but they have this conscience that God has put in them, whether they believe in Him or not. God still gave you a conscience. But they have this conscience that allows them to want to be accountable. God plus limits, because He has to give us limits. It's no different from our parents. Equals good, right? Our parents love us, and so they don't want us to do certain things, and they say no, and they put limits because they care. They understand things that we don't understand when we were children. It's the same thing with God. He understands things that we will never be able to comprehend, and that's why He's got to set limits. Romans 14:2, so then each of us will give an account of himself to God. He does not want to see us hurt. It doesn't feel good to be accountable, and yet it says all things work together for good to those that love God. So when I used to think about that verse, I was thinking all things work together for good. Wow, man, going through stuff doesn't feel good. It doesn't say things are going to be good. It doesn't say it's going to feel good, you're going to like it. It just says that it's going to work together for good. And there's a big difference. It says conclusion, but there's 2 more slides. But it lets me know where I am. So since God knows all, controls all, and loves us, we can live accountably beyond fear from others. Romans 8:31, I love this verse. What then shall we say to all these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? I kind of translate that into, if God is for me, I really don't care who's against me. When you think about the word fear, it reminds me of the time that I was in my 20s or 30s, I can't remember, I think it was 30s, and I wanted to start my own business, and I had these dreams. I was going to make a lot of money. I was not going to work in ministry ever. I said I would never work in ministry. I said I would never work around youth, and I would never live in Virginia. And clearly, God had a different plan. I work in ministry, been in working ministry for 20 years. I live in Virginia. I crossed over from Maryland to Virginia. And I work with youth. I said I would never do that. But I wanted to start my own business, and my whole idea was I'm going to make lots of money, and I'm going to be the giver. I'm going to be one who gives away money, helping the churches, helping those people that help the church and the poor, and et cetera. I don't want to be involved in that, but I'm going to make the money so that they can have it. And that was my idea, and I really, really wanted to do that. Well, what happened? Business just went. I did all the right things. Had a business plan, did everything that you're supposed to do. Business completely went under. And then I became so afraid. And I was like, oh my gosh, look at this. You know, and I started to really think about something. Why is this happening? And then I started thinking about all these things, and I was so devastated, and I was just going through such a hard time. And then a thought came to me. LaWanda, what's the worst thing that could happen? So I was thinking, well, I could lose my house. I bought my house, didn't need any help. Okay, well, my dad did help a little bit, okay. And I said, I bought my house, I could lose it, I'm losing my business, I could lose my car, I'm gonna have to move back home with my parents, and you know, and then people are gonna know I failed, and this happened. And then it was like the Spirit spoke to me and said, is that the worst thing that could happen? And I was like, well, the worst thing that could happen is I could lose my salvation, I could be separated from God. And then all of a sudden this light bulb came on. That will never happen. I will never be separated from God. I am eternally secure. And then I came to the realization that the worst thing in my life will never, ever happen to me. Bad things will, unpleasant things will, but not the worst thing. You go back to, okay, I think I totally messed that one up. Let's see, start from current slide. All right, so I'm going to run through this. Can't do everything all at the same time. Let's see. You know, the house's tagline is breaking cycles, building futures. And when I think about accountability and being accountable, you can start at any point in time. You could be saying, oh my gosh, things are just so bad where we are. The environment is so bad. No one's being held accountable. You can start at any moment in time to break that cycle. That's not what we were necessarily talking about, but break that cycle of not being accountable, being afraid to be accountable, and build that future where people are accountable. And that's why I kind of wanted to put that in there, because it's so important. Lives can be really at stake. And I'm going to show you this video. And when I think about the House DC and how important it is for people to be accountable, and how important it is for them to be vulnerable and to be open, to be honest, and correct the wrongs. I think about how we have to pour into the life of these young people. And the only way we can do what's right by them and for them is we have to live right before God. And so this video it's a wrap. So you younger guys going to enjoy that probably. The older people that are over, you know your age. Just bear with it, but looks into his words. When he says Ma Deuce, I just want to let you know that he's saying his mom died. And he's talking about that. But when I think about this young man, I think about, man, there's lives that are at stake. He now comes through the House DC, and he is able to get a meal, and he's graduated from high school, and the other day he just got his learners, and he is living life. But we had to be a strong group of individuals to even get someone to a point where we could see a life change. I just want to give you a glimpse of that.
Man, he the GOAT. You don't know how I feel. You don't know how I feel. My man just squealed.
When my mother's friends were in her house, they were drinking. I learned to go in their house and fight, even rob their house while they were downstairs drinking.
You don't know how I feel. Losing someone that you love. My deuce was good. You don't know how I feel. Growing up without a hug. Mr. Kisses and love. You don't know how I feel. When your man 6 feet and he was just trying to eat. You don't know how I feel. You don't know how I feel. You don't know how I feel. Losing someone that you love. My deuce was good. You don't know how I feel. Growing up without a hug. Mr. Kisses and the love. You don't know how I feel. When your man 6 feet and he was just trying to eat. You don't know how I feel. You don't know how I feel. You don't know how I feel. Without a father to teach. Growing up in these streets trying to find a way to eat. For a family of 3. Man, they just get deep. You don't know how I feel. When your man just squeal. He just cut him a deal. You get sent to a cell. Like you living in hell. You can touch your next meal. You don't know how I feel. When you get that call that your man at the bar. Now you starting like a loss. Like how could it be? We were just supposed to meet. Make a plan on how to eat. For the 10 GB. We put on for the streets. You don't know how I feel. You don't know how I feel. You don't know how I feel.
You know, dying is just as glorious as living when you really think about it. Because you couldn't have a life if you didn't have death, and you couldn't have death without life. So how could death be less glorious than life? They're both intertwined with one another.
You don't know how I feel. Losing someone that you love. My deuce was good. You don't know how I feel. Growing up without a hug. Mr. Kisses and love. You don't know how I feel. When your man 6 feet and he was just trying to eat. You don't know how I feel. You don't know how I feel. You don't know how I feel. Losing someone that you love. My deuce was good. You don't know how I feel. Growing up without a hug. Mr. Kisses and the love. You don't know how I feel. When your man 6 feet and he was just trying to eat. You don't know how I feel. You don't know how I feel. You don't know how I feel. Been told that you switch. Whole time you just chill, cause life getting real. It's me and Big Bro. We gotta pay these bills. We got little sus, cause we all she got. So don't get shot. Look where we at. Like we out in Iraq. Youngest down by the back. Man, you gotta watch your back. Man, you can't relax. That's how you get got. You gotta move smart. You gotta play your part. If they ain't with it, you tear them apart. This is from the heart. Man, I love my block. I'm headed to the top. But the grind don't stop. So I put it in pop.
That we have lived accountable to the point where we can make a real difference in someone's life. It's so important when you think about what's at stake. And there's so many things that are at stake, and we can't take it lightly. When our desire and practice is to live right before God, when our desire and practice, we're not perfect, but having that desire and practicing that is to live right before God, we can experience, because it's not always going to happen, but we can experience accountability beyond fear. Thank you. So I'm open. If anybody has any questions, feel free to come up to the podium. If you want to just stand where you are and ask your question, feel free to do so. And I think Matthew's going to take the mic down. Okay.
So thank you for being here and sharing about these experiences you've had in this amazing ministry. One of the things that strikes me listening to what you've accomplished at the house, DC, is creating something that's largely missing. So when we think about accountability, as we've been doing at this conference, one of the things that stands out to me is the way in which there has to be a certain kind of relationship between the person who's going to be doing the holding of accountability and the person who's willing to let themselves be held accountable. And in our modern urban neighborhoods especially, those kind of underlying relationships just aren't there. I mean, maybe to some degree there's remnants of them in the families that remain and in the churches that remain. But it seems to me that as I'm hearing from you that you've succeeded in building those kinds of relationships where they can bear the weight of this kind of accountability that we've been trying to describe here, and not just collapse, where the kids just leave when you try to hold them accountable. And I wonder if you could say just a bit about that underlying relationship building. I know you started with that, describing, I thought, how things go on your team, but I'm especially curious how you keep the kids involved when you're actually confronting them in the ways that you have to hold them accountable and secure that kind of relationship.
Sure. So let me say this. I remember I was attending a church, and we were advertising for one of our events. And a woman came up after, the service, and we had brochures out. And she said, "Hey, I heard about your program, and I just want you to know that a friend of mine lives in the community, and her kid will not go there. You guys have the worst kids in your program." And I thought, hey, don't talk about our little kids like that. But then I started thinking, I was like, well, she's kind of right. But I hate to use that term. And I started thinking about, why do we attract the most challenging young people? Like, what is it that makes us attract? How we're able to build these relationships? And we just really believe in meeting young people where they are, and just meeting anybody where they are. It doesn't matter their age. And so we realized that the co-founders, and I came 2 years after the house got started, I said, you know what, we need a state-of-the-art recording studio. Music and media dominates their world, so we're going to do that. We're going to feed the kids a meal every night because they're hungry, they need food. We're going to provide a safe place for them to come in and just hang out and just be loved. And last night, one of the gentlemen asked me about rules. I said, well, with our organization, we have rules like no cussing, no fighting. We have just basic rules. I said, but we really are not someone that, hey, if you do this or you do that or you don't go to school or et cetera, you can't come here. We're not like that at all. Because we work with the most challenging young people, we have to be relational. And so what that looks like is just really accepting them for where they are at that time. So when someone comes to the doors of the house, they feel this incredible love. And so they know that, if they walk through the door and they're angry, for example, and they slip and they say, oh, what the, whatever. A lot of times they'll go, oh my goodness. And we're not gonna say, you just said a curse word, get out. They've just corrected. They understand that, that's not how the street term, roll. That's not even sound like me, but anyway. It's not. I was trying to think of something that sounds kind of cute. But they will stop themselves. And so we don't say, get out. Sometimes we may have somebody young coming in and they are high. We'll say, hey, you're high. We'll see you tomorrow. Oh, man, I want some food. Okay, come on, we'll get you a plate of food. Take it with you. We'll see you tomorrow. So we have to have the latitude to be flexible and not to be so harsh. Just think about how harsh people can be. I met someone, Douglas, I can't remember his last name, but he spoke about mass incarceration he told me his talk was Thursday. And just think about how harsh and unforgiving our society is. Imagine if God did that to me every time I did something, that he didn't forgive, that he held me accountable for the rest of my life, that he would not offer that opportunity of hope, of redemption. And so we have to look at our young people from a grace perspective, the same grace that Jesus gives us. Because even though we may not be going out and taking food or trying to, get some food for the day or whatever, certain things are still in our heart. The things that we think in our heart, the things that we think in our mind, he knows that we're still sinning. We're no better than anyone else. And so we understand that we have to create an environment where there's a lot of grace. And what happens is that what they see is that we just really care. And I think that that's the one thing is that people know when you're authentic and when you're phony. You ever, meet those people like, oh, hey, girl, and oh, man, she is just so fake. They're not being real. I can't think of what to say for you guys. I don't know what you guys do, but anyway. And so trying to meet them where they are, and part of that is when they walk through the doors, and this is one thing that we really believed in, there are no expectations to do anything. So you can walk through the door, and you can come in and eat every day and leave and not participate in any program. You can come through the door. We have something every week and right now because of COVID, things have changed a lot and we're trying to figure this whole thing out. But over the years, we have this weekly Bible study that we call Life Sessions, and they're every Thursday, they're 20 minutes, and they try to find something that's more relatable to young people. But you don't have to come to that if you don't want to. You can just say, hey, I'm not going to live session. I'm going to leave. When it's over with, I'm coming back. I'm going to have my meal. There's so many things that we just don't have restrictions. And so we allow you to be safe. And so what happens is because you see, wow, these people are authentic. They let me just come in here. They don't say, so tell me your problem. Okay, are you from an abused home? Tell me everything. We just don't do any of that. We give them that opportunity to just have that safe space. And what happens is they start to tell us what's going on in their life. And sometimes they do that through the recording studio. And then other times they'll do that just in having conversations when we're at retreat. So we just believe in, and we're not an academic program at all. We don't have an after-school program where they come in and there's math and there's reading because of the kind of young people that we're dealing with. So it's meeting people wherever they are. And for this particular group, we understand that they have the need for, music, they have the need for food, they have the need to just feel safe. And so creating that safe environment then allows us to speak into their life. So once we earn that right to be heard, I remember taking a gentleman home one day and he was, I had to pick him up. His grandmother asked me to pick him up from school. And I'm pulling up and I see him from a distance. And just to give you a practical example of what that looks like, and I see him from a distance, and he's looking, and I just knew what he was thinking. Oh, here's this old church lady coming to get me. Let me put my headphones on now, so I don't have to listen to what she's got to say. He was in summer school. And I turned the radio to what I thought he was probably listening to. And he gets in the car, and I just said, hey, what's up? He goes, hey. And he sees I've got the radio on, his station. And I said, summer school, huh? He goes, yeah. I said, sucks, doesn't it? He goes, yep. We didn't say another word. We start talking. We didn't say another word. And then all of a sudden, I just said, a song came on, and I knew what was going on at the time. And I said, hey, what's up with this rapper and this battle that they're having? I said, that other guy, I said, what's up with that? And he goes, oh, Miss LaWanda, let me just tell you. See, he's a fake. He's trying to act like he's this and this and that. And then we just started connecting. I said, well, the other one is genuine. Now, what I didn't say was I loved the music. I just said he's powerful and he's genuine. And so that made that connection and that relationship. And then after that, I couldn't get the young man to stop talking. And I said, listen, I have to go to the store. I'll drop you off first. And he goes, oh, no, I'll go with you to the store. I can carry your bags or something. And so that's that connection when you can meet young people where they are, where you can meet anyone where they are instead of trying to get them to understand you and just being and trying to understand instead of being understood. And I think that that's really been the success that we have. Other questions? Man, I must be really good. Oh.
So thank you for your wonderful presentation. I'm so grateful for it. At one point, when I was hearing you reflect on how God is in control and we are not, it made me think about the extent to which you think sometimes we sort of distort what that means in such a way that it allows us to let ourselves off the hook for our accountability to serve, to respond, to change, to meet the need that you so clearly have been meeting. I mean, to what extent can it sometimes be the case that those of us who see ourselves as accountable to God but find it really hard because of those fear factors that you named, to see ourselves as really capable of investing, of making the kinds of changes that are really needed within our own hearts, within our own lives, in overhauling how we spend our money, how we spend our time, the sorts of people that are really in our main area of focus. To what extent can we sometimes, in acknowledging that God is in control, actually slip into sort of self-justifying our own passivity? Not really seeing that there are, in fact, things that we can do, things that we, in fact, are equipped by God to do in using our own purviews of control to do, to enact change, to sense a sense of summons or vocation, to really use our gifts and opportunities to do better.
Okay, first of all, the mic made her talk softer. So let me see if I understand your question, and that is, we know that we're accountable to God, but yet in our own mind, it doesn't manifest its way in how we really act, how we really think, how we really feel. And the term, I'm accountable to God, just sounds good, but what does it practically look like? Yeah. It really comes from, to me, just being, it sounds good to say I believe in God. That sounds really good, right? I believe in God, I believe in Jesus. I'm saved, I'm going to heaven. Sounds really good. But then, I mean, and I know even sometimes you're like, they're really a follower of Jesus? Like, is that how Jesus is supposed to act? I remember watching this program one night. He's an atheist. And he's a political comedian, commentator, vulgar. And I was like, oh, there was just so much political stuff going on. And sometimes I like to hear what's happening around the world, and I'm listening to him. And he's straight up atheist. And he goes, where the heck is Jesus in all this? I mean, what about Jesus? I mean, don't these people talk about Jesus? And I thought, wow, that's shocking to hear this come out of this man's mouth. I think that there's a difference, and I think that's what people don't understand. And the reason why I use the term follower of Jesus is that there are many people that have a mind belief in something. And there are individuals that are Christian because that's the way they were raised. They're the Ku Klux Klan considers themselves a Christian group, right? And there are many people that use the term Christian or evangelical, and they associate with that. There's a difference with the term being used and who the person really is. And so that's really the difference. The difference is that there are individuals that are truly followers of Jesus. And those true followers of Jesus, they are convicted. Because the only way that you can live and not feel guilty and not feel like everything revolves around you and not care about being accountable and wanting to be unethical and feeling comfortable is that God does not live in you, because the Holy Spirit convicts all of those who belong to him. And so to me, that's really the difference. And I do believe that there are serious followers of Jesus that sometimes because of pain or hurt, you don't want to recognize the truth. And I think that's when it's so important for particularly like pastors and people in leadership that are in ministry to just really tell people, be honest with God about how you feel, and then they give an idea of what that honesty looks like. As I shared with you, and I love, I've had pastors where they're just really honest about things that they've done, and it just kind of like gives people the freedom to feel that way. But I really believe that there is a big difference from the terminology of Christian versus being a follower of Jesus, because that resonates with you. That means that you're trying to follow his example. And when you follow him, the Holy Spirit is living in you and he convicts you. And so I hope I answered that a little bit. Any other questions? And while you are coming up, and I think the other thing is just asking God to reveal truth to you, because we do like to live in our own head, and we do like to think that, we're okay. But asking God, reveal truth. David said, search my heart, search my soul, find those wicked ways in me. And so when you say, God, reveal truth to me, then that allows God to really speak to you. So I just thought of that one. Yes, sir.
Thank you again for that presentation. You mentioned accountability holders. And in my experience, especially if there's a culture of fear, accountability holders tend not to last, meaning that they'll get pushed out or silenced so that the status quo remains, right? So, as you think about what it might look like for accountability holder to persevere, maybe in a toxic environment, and even more so to thrive, what are some things that come to your mind just by means of encouragement, but then also practical steps?
So there was a time years ago when we were told if you take Christ out of the mission statement, you'll get funding. It's very difficult for the House DC to get funding because we're very strong faith-based. We don't get government funds, thank God for that. And we were told, hey, listen, you guys should consider this. You should consider taking Christ out of your mission statement. And so we said, okay, we'll have a meeting. The board brought that up. They wanted us to, have that discussion. And so I walked in. I'm very objective. I try to, look at every situation. But that was one of those times I wasn't objective. I walked in with my mind going, oh, heck no, that's not happening. Not while I'm here. But we went through the practice and we talked. And so there was this one group that was like, we're keeping Christ in the mission statement. There was another group that was like, maybe we should think about it. Maybe we should take it out, but we can still talk about Christ, but just take them out the mission statement so we can get funds from the foundations who hate faith-based organizations. And we went back and forth, and it was very contentious. We were arguing, and we were going back and forth. And then finally, I just said, why are you here? This was at one of our staff retreats that we had for about 4 days. And we went around the room, and I said, why are you at the House DC? And everything was, well, because I want to I want youth to relate to Christ in a way that they can relate. I want to share the gospel. I want to, and so finally, one of the people on the other side said, we can't even explain Christ out of our own mission statement. And so we solidified not only just keeping his name in our mission statement, but also adding his name to our vision statement. But at that time, I was director of operations, and funding was very difficult. And there was somebody who was really pushing this, and they really wanted this. But I was also thinking about, okay, the house could close its doors. I mean, we're having a really tough time this year, and we're probably going to close the doors. And we're not going to be able to service the community. I'm going to lose my job, and everybody else is going to lose their job. But I kept thinking about, but what's the right thing to do? If he says he's going to supply all your needs, he says all things will work together for good. It didn't say they're going to be good. And so I had to have this resolve in my mind that I really have to trust him. So do I trust him, or do I trust man who thinks he's controlling the money, the finances? Who do I really trust? And sometimes when you have to make that decision, you could lose. You could lose your job. You could lose your friends. You could lose your income. That's what happened to me when I lost that business. But it came down where we walked away from that, and I really thought the house was probably going to have its doors closed. But I had peace in my spirit that we were doing the right thing. And this was the right thing to do, because ultimately it's God. And I just said, hey, listen, if the house closes, it's on you. It's completely on you. I don't understand why, but I'm not going to compromise what I believe is right for the sake of what man can do. Scripture says, do not fear the one who can destroy the body. And yeah, he can destroy the body. But fear the one who can destroy both body and soul. And I take that to heart. So I will share the story after that. We were just very surprised. 3 months after that, we were awarded funds to renovate our building. We did not close down, and so we were very grateful for that. But nothing was promised. And so the mindset has to be, who do I fear? Who am I the servant of? And I have to live that way. And I have to understand that this world here, and this is one thing about being believers that we can be excited about, this is not my home. This is temporary. And I'm going to have some hard times, and I have to start really thinking. I understand what Paul was talking about, really understanding he's looking for the eternal. Stephen, all he did was wanted to share the gospel. What did they do? They stoned him to death. We're not getting stoned to death, even though it does feel like that sometimes. But, when you look at just people being persecuted, so it really comes down to, who do I fear? Who is my allegiance to? Any other questions?
Wanda, I want to thank you very much for being with us here, and thank you for the collaboration that we've had over the years, and for letting so many Baylor folks participate in your work. And it's great to have you here, and we hope you'll come back soon, and thank you for the wonderful talk.
Thank you guys so much.